Please be seated.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good morning. Today is the Sunday of All Saints, Ton Agion Pandon. There's in the church, there are feast days attached to specific dates. March 25th, October 8th, they're going to have specific dates, specific things they celebrate. And there are other feasts that all revolve around Pascha. When after Pascha, there's these things called movable feasts, right? 50 days after Pascha, Pentecost, we just celebrate. It will always move with Pascha. This day, the Sunday of All Saints, is one of those. So it's a big feast in our church. It's not always on the same date of the year, but it's always at the same place in relation to when we celebrated Easter, the Sunday of All Saints. And I have a lot I'd like to say about the saints, because I'm grateful to the saints. I think they're one of the greatest treasures we have, and if you ever have the blessing to meet someone who's at least on the road trying to be a saint, you will feel mostly gratitude. It's a beautiful thing to see. So I'm trying to think of how to organize this, and I thought of, well, in Greek, the Greeks say, archi epistemis noimaton episkepsis. The beginning of science is to visit the meaning of words. Okay, so we can take the meaning of the word saint. I don't know Latin as well as I know Greek, so we're going to go with Agios. Agios. The history of this word was first applied not necessarily to people, but to items that were used in religious rituals. They were items that were set aside for use in a temple, in a ritual. So we at our homes, we have spoons, right? Or we have a cup. In the altar, we have a cup, but we call it the Aion Poterion, the holy cup. Okay? So the root of this word that we eventually apply to people are things that have been set aside, dedicated, are used for God, for worship, for coming into contact with what is greater than the world. And that exactly is what a saint is. A saint is a person whose life has been set aside, whose life they have set aside for God, whose life they have set aside for worship and for service. That's what it means to be a saint in Agios. How does this happen? Well, we visited the term, now we can visit the epistle, which was beautifully read, by the way, and I was grateful for that because I was going to use it in the sermon, so thank you, Ari. St. Paul in Hebrews talks about the saints. He starts like this: Brethren, all saints, okay, so here's the saints. Who are they? They're people who, through faith, conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, received promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign enemies to flight, and we could actually go on, such as raised the dead. St. Peter raises the dead in the New Testament. We could go on, such as heal the sick, heal the blind. The saints do these wonderful accomplishments, and we could go on with this list. But if we want to figure out how to be like them, I think the most important thing is in the very beginning. How did they do all this stuff? How did they do it? St. Paul says, through faith. Through faith. Saints are people through whom God works, through their faith. And faith has two parts, in my understanding. Faith is on the one hand, an act of trust in God. Faith is, on the one hand, acknowledging that there are moments, there are areas of uncertainty in our life that we will always have, and acting in the face of that uncertainty. So an example of this might be, do you know there's a God? Yeah. Do you believe it? Yeah. Do you have faith? Do you have faith that there's a God? Yeah. Okay. Well, sell everything you have and give it to someone. Sell all your stuff and give it to someone. Okay. If we are sure there's a God, we're absolutely 100% sure that there's a God, there's a heaven, we're probably going to do that. But I haven't met anyone, I think that the general experience is that there's always a lingering doubt. You go to write that check and sell all your stuff, there's always going to be a lingering doubt. Is this really the right thing? Is there really a God? Is this really, think of the martyrs. Think of the martyrs. Is there, deny Christ. You really think Christ was God? We're going to kill you if you don't deny him. Here the rubber meets the road. And there's uncertainty. And so one act of faith is acting a certain way, even in the face of uncertainty. Even, I'm not 100% sure that there's a God on the other side of the sword. But I've fallen enough in love with Christ, I've fallen enough in love with God, I trust it more than anything else, and I trust it enough to act in faith and to not deny him, and instead to be martyred. That's one type of faith. It's how we act in the face of uncertainty, which I tend to think we prefer to just pretend that uncertainty doesn't exist. But if we want our faith to be real, I think we have to acknowledge that it does exist at different times in different places. That's one version of faith. Acting, following Christ, no matter what. Just because he's beautiful, just because that's what you choose. That's one sort of faith, acting in the face of uncertainty. The other sort of faith, I think, is actually using our mind a bit, looking around and looking for evidence. Blessed are those who believe and don't see, but the disciples believed, many of them. Why? Because they saw. Why does Zacchaeus, who's up in the tree, believe? Well, because Christ calls him down and knows his name ahead of time. He has evidence, and he acts on it. So on the one hand, we have uncertainty. We act anyway with uncertainty. On the other hand, I don't think the experience of any Christian is to simply be a Christian with no evidence or no use of their reason. Both of these things are available to us. And I think Christ encourages them. So, on this side, the evidence for God, one temptation can be, well, the disciples saw it, right? The disciples were there with Christ, and they saw him do amazing things. They saw him know their name ahead of time. They saw someone born blind, and he gives them their sight back. They see someone laying down for 38 years at the pool of Bethesda, and he raises them without the pool. They see these amazing things. They're with him. And then they see him on the cross, and then they see him 3 days later after he'd been buried and crucified. They see him, right? So they have an evidence-based faith as well. And it's easy for us to say, well, I don't have that. I didn't get to see Christ raise someone from the dead. How do I know he's God? How do I know there's a God? Where's the evidence? If you keep reading in this epistle, and this is one reason I'm grateful to the saints, the evidence has actually continued for 2,000 years. And here in America, we don't have necessarily the privilege of the historical continuity and seeing it close and sort of easy to follow. If you go somewhere like Greece, you'll visit, everyone knows, Saint Dionysios. You'll go and you'll visit and you'll see a saint, and you'll see the slippers wear out every year, and you see that his body hasn't decomposed in the way a normal body would decompose. There's some evidence. Christ's power, the grace of God, things outside of what are normal, things that would convince us of the existence of God and of God being Christ, exist. They weren't just 2,000 years ago, and they exist in the lives of the saints. As I said, St. Peter, you read the Acts of the Gospels, Christ tells his disciples, you'll do greater things than me, and you see them doing these things. And guess what? The apostles also had apostles. The disciples also had disciples. And guess what those disciples did? More miracles as well. And guess what their disciples did? More miracles as well. And it actually stretches to 2026. And if you don't believe me, you're allowed to not believe me. If you don't believe me, the reason, I'll just suggest it, may be simply that you haven't seen it. You haven't read the books. You haven't seen the places. We might just not be aware. We know some of the saints on our wall, right? How many of us know of Saint Eumenios Saridakis? Anyone heard of Saint Eumenios Saridakis? Right. He was made a saint in 2022. Okay. Saint Amphilochius of Patmos. Does anyone know him? Okay. He was my spiritual father's spiritual father. This is one generation. The saints are alive. Miracles still happen. And the reason that we celebrate today all of the saints is because real saints are hiding usually, and most of all from themselves. I remember asking when I was in Greece, my chant teacher who grew up on Mount Athos, and I said, are there saints on Mount Athos? He said, yeah, of course there are. I said, well, who are they? I said, well, most of them we don't know because they're the most simple people and they don't even know they're saints. People who are totally dedicated to God. Their life is what the gospel says. Turn the other cheek. Don't worry about tomorrow. Walk another mile. Give the coat off your back. Their life is that. And of course, at the end of the day, they say what the saints say. I did nothing. I just did my Christian duty, right? This is what everyone does because they're also not judging. Saints are alive. The evidence for Christ, for God, continues back. We're not without evidence. We don't have an excuse that we haven't seen miracles. We just need to open a book and maybe take a trip or two. And so I just want to, on this Day of All Saints, ask two things of you that are connected. The first is read about the saints. Read about the saints. We know the saints on our walls, but there are everyday saints that are celebrated. Read about the ones at least that we know about. At least read about the ones we know about. Because there are many and they continue. And there are saints living now that, of course, will be hiding as best they can. There's living saints now. And if you're not so sure you're going to meet a living saint now, you will see holiness in so many people. If we sat together for coffee, I could tell you moments of holiness in your own life. Moments where your heart goes to God because that's what you want. Moments where you're ready to take the leap and totally be dedicated. We have to learn the saints. This is my first plea. Learn the saints and look for holiness all around us. Look for lives set aside for God. And my second plea is to reorient through that process of learning about the saints. Reorient your own goal and your own understanding of what you're called to be as a human being. Because as a Christian, you're not called just to be a good person, a pleasant person. You're called to be a saint. And the more you understand what that is, at first it will seem unattainable. And then it will seem like the one thing you care about. The one thing you care about. Because all these miracles we listed off, of the holiness that I've encountered in my life, the most miraculous thing of all is to see someone who loves God, really loves God. And if you see someone who really loves God, you'll see someone who really loves you. Strive for that, and let's all strive for that together.